Hey, hello everyone. Luis Lima here, directly from Central Florida, Orlando area, for Kardec Radio and hosting Spiritism, a closer look. By the way, welcome to 2022, right? Last year was very, very challenging. Actually, this past couple of years, because of all the pandemic thing and the situation, it has been certainly a challenge for most of us, if not all of us, and hopefully 2022 is going to be a little better, it's going to be different, but for now all we have to do is our part. So welcome to 2022, now that we have passed Christmas celebrations and we have passed the promises for ourselves of New Year's resolution. Let's get started. By the way, let me bring this up a little bit. This thing about the New Year's resolution, right? We do this all we do this every year. It's a very common thing in our society to establish this quotes, right? New Year's resolution. And for a lot of us, what happens is if we look back into our lives past, say, 20 years, maybe 15 years, a lot of the New Year's resolutions are just repeats from New Year's resolutions that we made in the past, and it just never happened because we didn't get to it. We weren't really ready to face it. We were not ready to leave what we have to leave behind. We just wouldn't be able to do it for some reason. Of course, things happen, situations come by, but in general, this New Year's resolution is something that we keep dragging and dragging for most of us. Not everyone, of course, but for most of us, for the average, I would say, human being in this planet, that happens. And then it got me thinking a little bit. Why is that so hard? Why is that so difficult, or to say at least challenging, to establish our own? Because we do this ourselves. It's not a divine decree that comes down and say your New Year's resolution is this and this and this, and we don't like it, and we have to deal with that. It's not this. It's something that we establish ourselves for supposedly our own benefit and in our own favor, but it becomes this struggle, leaving things behind, changing habits, changing things, doing something different, moving in a different direction, whatever it is, your or our New Year's resolution. So it looks like uh, there's always something holding us back, and older things and past things keep showing up, and they repeat every along the way through the new year, supposedly, right? So at the end of the year we're back to square zero, and some of these things are really, they really hit on us because we try to get rid of them. We try to I would say at least work around this, some of these things, and we can't. We just can't. It's just very difficult to get it done. They look like somebody put like the Everest mountain, the Himalayas, right in front of us. But the thing is, this Everest is put in front of us, on our path, by ourselves. Nobody does that for us. Every one of us, we have several Everests that we have put into our own path, and Everests are personal and not transferable. We cannot resolve anybody else's Everest. We cannot have anybody else resolve our Everest, so we can, you know, keep going on our path. It is just not that way. It's a personal thing, and it's a personal thing created by ourselves. So supposedly, what a New Year's resolution is, removing some of these Everests. But like I said, they are Everests, very hard to move, and usually we don't get it done. So I was thinking this past week or so about this New Year's resolution thing again, right? And then something came to my mind. It's the story of a man that was, for me, it's really, there's a really deep learning in knowing him, knowing his history, knowing what he did, what he didn't do, and why he did certain things and why he didn't. Um, he set an example for all of us. It's not Jesus. We had throughout humanity, throughout the course of thousands of years, we had several people who incarnated in on flesh here, and they were able to bring nice things, teach us a lot of different things. Jesus, of course, was the top one per se, but several other people had that in their mission. They came as a mission. So this guy in 1962, okay, here in the U.S. in 1962, we were going through an aggravated crisis on blacks and whites, racial segregation, all that kind of thing. But it wasn't just here. It was really a more global thing that it became very intense here in the US, but it wasn't the only place. So this guy in 1962, he was not here in the US, he was somewhere else. He was put in prison. He was a lawyer. He had 3 degrees from 3 different universities, all around studies of the law. And he was put in jail in 1962. He couldn't really figure out exactly like a black and white answer on why he was being uh, put in prison. So there was like general information about why, and then it came out to be that he was attempting to end institutionalized racial segregation. We need to stop a little bit here. We need to look in before we go ahead. So, of course, we're talking about racial segregation. But before we go ahead, we need to look into the word institutionalized. Racial segregation happens everywhere. Everywhere. It's present everywhere in the world in greater intensity, not so great in other places, but it is a thing that we have to learn how to how to pass one day. How do we leave this behind anyway? Regardless, it does happen. So you're going to find people here and there, individuals that have this idea of racial segregation. They want this to be in place, but institutionalized racial segregation means the group or the country or the region that you belong to believes, as a general, the group believes that racial segregation should be the thing. And if you want to be part of the group, you are forced into that. Even if you're not adept of racial segregation, if you want to be part of that group, you need to become one of those. So it's a mandatory thing. If you want to be part of it, it becomes mandatory. So that's complicated. So this guy was put in jail, put in prison because of his supposedly attempt. That's what he was told. Supposedly attempt to end institutionalized racial segregation. 1962. He was in prison for 27 years, not days, not hours, 27 years. Throughout this time, 27 years, he was he was moved from prison to prison 3 times because they thought he needed a prison that was even more secure, then another one that was even more secure because of his quote attempt to end institutionalized racial segregation. In 1990, 27 years later, he finally was able to walk a free man. 3 years later, he won the Nobel Prize for Peace. 27 years in jail, 3 years after he was made a free man, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. In 2013, he returned to the spirit world. We're talking about Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, president of South Africa. The story is a little bit more interesting, not because of the 27 years he was in jail, but the minute that he was made a free man and he had to walk out of prison. Of course, this is within our lifetime, so we had television showing the news, and we had different media outlets covering the situation. So the day he was going to walk out of prison, the cameras of the whole journalistic world were on him. So he comes out, and of course we want to hear what he's got to say. We want to hear his words. The journalists are eager to ask him questions and know everything about it, how he made it, 27 years in prison, and he is now walking as a free man. So as he was walking out, this is what he said. Quote, because I'm not making this up. So, quote, as I walked toward my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. As I walked toward my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. So what he's portraying here, or he's bringing as a message, is it's not physical prison, but if you're gonna walk out a free man and you're gonna be thinking about every single minute of every single day of those 27 years, you're still in prison, you're still living there, you're reliving that every minute of those 27 years, one after another. So you are still there, you're still inside the prison, you're not a free man anymore. This is what it's trying to tell us. Very interesting. Of course, it's not easy for the average person to be able to do this. It's got to be a more elevated spirit, like he was, doing greater things for not only South Africa but for the world. Now, there's one little bit element that I want to bring into the history here. In 1990, when he was made a free man, that was done by decree. The decree came from the president of South Africa, who was a white man. He was a white man, Frederick de Klerk. So Frederick de Klerk raises to power in 1989. He looks at Mandela and says, "This is absurd. The guy's been in prison for 27 years for doing nothing other than, made all men, trying to make all men equal in a way." So the clerk makes Mandela a free man. And the clerk is in power until 1994, when we had the very first democratic elections in South Africa, where people would vote. So nobody's going to be appointed here and there. Nobody's chosen. It's chosen by the people. And guess who won? Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela became the first democratically elected president of South Africa, also the first black president of South Africa. Interesting thing is, Mandela calls the clerk, prior president, to be his vice president. In South Africa words, they don't use the term vice president as we do here. They use deputy president, but it's about the same thing. So he invites the clerk to be the vice president so they can go through this thing together, because they started this thing together a year before. Very interesting, right? So they go together running the country from that point on. And there's another element in this whole story here. The Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel Prizes in general, they are not necessarily tied to one person. it could be more than one. The prize can be shared depending on, the analysis and the judgments, the voting, and so when Nelson Mandela won the Nobel Peace Prize, he didn't win alone. He had to share the prize. And the person sharing the prize with him was ex-President Frederick de Klerk. Because yes, he was a huge and a big part of this whole process. You see, they were together in this thing when de Klerk freed Mandela, but they kept going together, hand in hand. They had a mission, both of them. So President de Klerk, with Nelson Mandela, they had to share the Peace Prize. That for me is such a beautiful thing, such a a grand uh, uh, divine plan, if you will. And then from then on, Nelson Mandela goes to be the president, and things go on. Okay, what do we take from this? Especially from that phrase that Mandela said when he left prison. He wanted to leave prison for good, not like a lot of us do, no, I don't talk to this person because 15 years ago this thing happened, and I don't want to see that person because 25 years ago this thing happened. We're living in prison. We are attaching shackles to our spiritual feet, and they won't let us go anywhere because it's too heavy. Imagine a prisoner, a real prisoner in real prison, and they put a shackle on his feet. One shackle, he can probably walk. It's going to be hard, it's going to hurt, but he can probably move around a little bit. If you put two of these, he's not going to be able to, most likely not going to be able to move. More than two, forget about it. He won't move at all. It's the same thing if we put these shackles on our spiritual feet by living things, reliving things that happened years and years and decades ago, and we keep bringing them back, and we keep remembering that person who did this, and I keep remembering because envy because somebody did this, and resentment, and all of these things, hatred because this thing happened 30 years ago. We're not allowing us to go anywhere. We are still in prison. We are still living 30 years ago. Every time I remember, oh, I had a fight with this person 30 years ago, I don't want to see his face, her face. I'm still there. I'm still, for the brain, it's the same thing. The brain will not recognize memory from fact. It's the same thing. It's generating the same chemistry in the body. So if we keep feeding these things, if we keep going back to the past, pulling these things and reliving them, we are going to be in prison forever and ever. And that's what Mandela is trying to teach us here. He himself, in his situation, he had to leave bitterness and hatred behind because he won't take us anywhere. Literally, you won't let us go anywhere. It will stick around as an Everest for as long as I want. And I don't want an Everest on my path. I want to just go. I don't want to face this huge mountain that came again and again and again from 35, 40 years ago because of this and that. So I think this plugs in a little bit. That's what I was saying in the beginning. In what these New Year's resolutions. So the New Year's resolutions actually, they should be us looking into the past and getting rid of those things. We can, of course, create new things. We can do things differently, but we need to be able to move ahead. And we can't move ahead with shackles. They are holding us back. They are making us go nowhere. and the bitterness increases and the hatred increases because I want to move and I can't because it hurts. And then it gets worse because now I can't move and I'm really even mad even more than I was before. So all these things, all these vices, they will be around because we're not perfect. That's what we are here for, to get rid of these vices little by little, promote our virtues, and then get to perfection. That's what we're here for. But I won't be able to do this if I keep going back in time to fetch and fish things of the past that made my Everest one day. I won't be able to do anything. I will be able to complain more and more every day, to revolt more and more every day. By the way, talking about revolt, Spirit Emmanuel tells us something great. This is what it says: revolt is synonym with incomprehension, meaning we revolt and rebel when we do not understand a certain thing. And it doesn't help to be rebelling and rebelling and rebelling. Stop rebelling, stop revolting, and let's look at the situation and see, why am I not getting here? Why am I not seen on this picture? Keep rebelling and revolting. It's going to make us worse. It's going to increase the weight of the shackle that we carry. So Spirit Emmanuel very wisely advises against, stop revolting and rebelling. What is that I am not understanding properly? Where do I have to go to understand this thing? Do I have to look for a certain type of people? Do I have to read more? Do I have to study all of these? But revolting and rebelling will not help. It just increases the weight on the shackles. So all of these things, they only promote they promote delays on our moral progress. We want to go ahead, we want to follow our path, but we can't. It's like you put a string and you attach the string to you, to a pole, and you start walking, you start walking away from the pole. When the string is at its maximum length, that's it. You can't go anymore unless you go back to the pole and detach the string. Then you can continue your stuff. And that's what I think it means, at least for me, the idea of a New Year's resolution. It's where are my poles in the past that I attached strings? What are my shackles? What are my Everests? And how do I resolve those? Oh, because 30 years ago. Okay, and that was 30 years ago. All right, let's see what happened 30 years ago. Do we need to approach that person again? Do I need to just go there and say I'm sorry, or let's just do it, because that's resolution in action, at least an attempt. If we just complain and keep doing these resolutions one after the other, they're just piling up. They're not bringing any benefit. They're not doing anything on our own favor. I had a teacher who once said something very interesting. And I was a young boy, maybe, I don't know, maybe 12, 13 or so. I was a young teen. And it didn't make too much sense to me, but it just stuck into my head. And years later, many years later, I came to understand. He said something along these lines: you never change a job because of a boss. You never move out of your house because of your neighbor. You never go move to another school because of a teacher. And I go like, there's some sort of, in my young age, there's some sort of mystery here. There's a message, I understand, but there's some sort of mystery here. With time, I came to understand a lot better what he was trying to say. So don't change jobs because of a boss. Why? Because you might leave your job, go somewhere else, and your boss loves you so much that he's gonna follow you and go to the same company because the benefits are greater than the ones he was providing to you. And he's gonna be your boss there or your colleague. So that doesn't fix what I don't like about my job. It's not the person called the boss. Same for my neighbor. Oh, I don't like my neighbor because this and that and that. And so I'm going to move to another house. Then you move to another house. Who knows, your new neighbor is not going to be even worse. Or your two neighbors, one of each side of your new house, they're not going to be even worse than the one you had before. So you're going to change your entire life, go through financial, applications and so move the house and because you don't like your neighbor. So there's something your neighbor is telling us, our neighbor is telling us. We have to get better on certain things. There's this thing that the boss is telling you, you need to get better at this, you need to overcome this particular difficulty. Same with the neighbor. And again, don't change schools because of a teacher, because you go to the other school, the teacher can be, in your opinion, in our opinion, worse than the one you had before. Or you don't get along with them, or you just don't like his style, whatever it is. Whatever it is. So, sorry, guys. So I wanted to bring this because this is my own reflection at this beginning of the year. All these things about Mandela and how he was able to do 27 years. We couldn't barely go 27 hours on a prison, being there by something we didn't do. And this man showed how elevated a spirit can be. So I use his example a lot. I really think what he said makes a lot of sense, and it comes from a highly elevated spirit, and I wanted to bring this to you. And the same here with this final idea of don't leave your job because of your boss. Don't leave your house because of a neighbor. And ultimately, don't leave your school because of your teacher. Guys, thank you very much for being with us tonight, for following us. And I'll see you next Wednesday right here at Kardec Radio, Spiritism, a closer look. We'll bring another topic to discuss. We're going to have some interviews this year. We're going to do some nice talks. So keep following us, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.